Now in this third composing lesson, basically what we're going to do is just spice up the harmony. We're going to take our chord progression that we wrote. We're not going to touch the melody just yet. We're just going to take the harmony, the chord progression that we wrote, and we're just going to see in what ways we can just make it a little bit more interesting, really start to expand it. And this is going to be very applicable to pretty much anything that you're writing, whatever genre you're writing in. This is going to be very applicable. And we're going to do this in 5 steps. The first step is going to be inversions. We're going to use inversions to just kind of create some more interest. And then the second step is we're going to just connect the bass a little bit, and I'll explain more what I mean by that in a bit. And then the third one we're going to do is use voice leadings. The voice leading that we've been talking about in some of the other lessons, we're going to use voice leading to also create just some more interest in the chords. And then number 4, what we're going to do is employ some of the other voicings that we talked about as well. Remember, like the open, the closed, the combined voicings. We're going to employ those as well. And then in the 5th step, what we're going to do is just vary the harmonic rhythm. And again, I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that when we get there. But essentially in this first step, what I want to do is just try out some different inversions. Again, like the inversions that we've been talking about, and just see which ones we kind of like and see how this can just really make our chord progression a little bit more expressive. So we'll start with our C major chord. And I don't think we're really going to change this one at all, because if we start with something other than that, if we start on a different inversion, it just doesn't sound like the home key nearly as much as if we were to start with just the root position C. And so we really need that to just establish what key we're in. And so let's move on to the next chord, which is E minor. And the way we're just going to play inversions here, I know we've done them in a few different ways, but what we're going to do is just leave the right hand alone and change what note is in the bass in the left hand, because that's really what determines what type of inversion we're using, is what's in the bass. And so our 2 other inversion options are with G in the bass and with B in the bass. And I will say, theory professors, composition teachers will very often say that having the 5th in the bass is really mostly reserved for pretty special occasions. And if you're going to have an inversion, it's most often going to be that first inversion with the 3rd in the bass. I think that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to go from C to go to E minor over G, which is having this G in the bass. What I might actually do is go down in the bass instead. Just, it's a bit of a smaller leap. So just hear how different that sounds from the first 2 chords, what they originally were. And instead it sounds a little different, and almost, even for me, it's almost just a little bit more to get used to, because it doesn't sound quite as pure perhaps, but I think it just sounds more interesting. It has a little bit more of depth to it. And I think I want to do the same for the next chord as well. We have an F normally. Let's put the 3rd of this chord, A, in the bass. So now if we're moving between these 2 chords, again, that just has so much more meaning, I think. And the next chord would normally be so already I think that's pretty close. However, I do have an idea. And it does involve something we haven't quite talked about, but just for this instance, I think it's a pretty special case, so I think that's really okay. And it's going to be using a different type of dominant. And we already have the 5 dominant, but there's also the 7th chord, which we also haven't talked about nearly as much, but the 7th chord is actually also considered a dominant, a chord built on the 7th in C major built on B. And since it's a diminished chord, a diminished triad, it has 3 minor thirds instead of either this or that. It just has a little bit more of, it has a little bit more of emotion behind it, right? It's a little, actually, it's more uncertain and kind of even more wants to lead to one than the G major chord already did. And so if we're to put this in our progression, we'll voice that a little better later, but actually, and then another thing we can do with this 7 is very common is, since it's built up of a minor third and then another minor third, what we can do is add another minor third to it and it becomes a 7th. You just hear how much tension that holds? So we have the 7th. A lot of times what composers do is they add that diminished 7th on top, and then what you also see is that everything actually voice leads very nicely. The B goes up to C, the D goes up to E, the F also goes down to D, then the A flat goes down to G. Again, it just has so much intention and emotion behind it, I think. We also don't have to leave this in interposition either. And again, what a lot of composers, a lot of theorists will say is that very often diminished triads will kind of almost by default have the third in the bass, it be in first inversion. So put that second note, that D, in the bass. So that's step 1, and here's what we have now after step 1, after just changing the inversions of 2 chords and switching the dominant 5 to the dominant, the 7 chord instead. So now let's move on to step 2, and that is we're going to be connecting the bass. This is really similar to what we did in the melody lesson, where we basically just filled in the notes in between gaps. And what this really does is just help the ear to kind of hear these chords to be closer together. When the bass is leaping around a lot, it can sound a little disjunct and maybe not as expressive, but when we add filler notes in between the notes of the bass, in between leaps, it kind of just helps us add some expression, add some intention to this chord progression. And again, like the melody, we're just going to use the notes of C major. Again, you could use some chromaticism, but again, we're going to talk more about that later. For now, we're just going to use the notes of C major. So let's look at right now where our leaps are in the bass. Well, we got this first one, right? C down to G. And the way we can fill in is use the 2 notes of C major that are in between C and G, which are B and A. So we can do just a straight walk down. But while we're at it, why don't we just add some rhythm to it anyway, and that's going to make this just be even better. I think probably another dotted rhythm would be good here. So then there's another step after this, so we can't fill in anything with that, that's already connected. But there is another leap from A to D. And again, there's just 2 notes in between these 2, or B and C. Maybe this time we do just use 2 quarter notes, just to kind of create some contrast. Since we had dotted rhythm at the beginning, let's just use 2 quarter notes here, just to make it more interesting, so that's not the same thing both times. Just fill in with that B and C. So now this is what our bass line sounds like with the right hand chords above it. So I can hear it's still pretty simple, but I think there's a lot of intention and motivation behind that already now. So now what I want to do for step 3 is to employ some of the voice leading that we've been talking about. And this is going to involve using inversions in the right hand now and changing, trying to keep common tones between chords the same so that our hand has to move the least amount possible. So again, we're starting here. What we might actually do is change the inversion in the right hand. And because the root is still C in the left hand, this is still a root position C major chord. And so no matter what inversion we have in the right hand, it still sounds like our home bass of C major. Just kind of thinking ahead here, I think, and probably what we'll do here, just so that we're not venturing too far away from our home inversion, we're just going to do a first inversion in the right hand. Remember, as we kind of start employing inversions a little bit, we'll kind of change the fingering pattern so that we'll have 1 and 2 on E and G and then 5 on C. Just fit the hand the best. So if we're starting with that, our next chord is E minor, and just really quickly, the common tones between C major and E minor are E and G. Those stay the same between the two chords. The only note that changes is C to B, and so that means the only note that has to move is C to B. So now we have two very nicely voice-led chords. Then for the next chord, between E minor and F, there aren't any common tones, so we kind of get to choose what we want to do here. We could have the right hand just go straight up, but I don't think that's nearly as interesting, and I also don't think, since we already know those two chords exist, and those will probably stay the same, I think we go instead down. Go down to this F and second inversion in the right hand. And sure, this E does have to leap a little bit down to C, but it's just a third, and so it's really not too big of a deal. And since B and G still voice lead very nicely to A and F, these chords I think still sound pretty close together, I think. Then our next chords. So now that we've just really quickly employed some of our voice leading, here's what we sound like after step 3. Already starting to really like that a lot. It's starting to come alive a little bit, I think. And also really quickly, I should mention that I am kind of just employing fingerings, especially in the left hand, kind of on the fly. And so if you see me kind of using a little bit of a weird fingering, like there I kind of did C and D both with the thumb, that's just because I'm kind of just live, just playing things and trying things out. If I were to spend more time with these, I would figure out, a better fingering. And we talk more about fingerings in some other videos as well, and how to kind of best employ them and use fingering substitutions and all that. But we'll save that for later. And we'll now move on to step 4, which is we're going to start to use some of our different voicings that we also talked about as well. When we use voicings, we could use all of one, but just for the purposes of demonstration and because I think it creates some good contrast and creates some good ideas between chords, I think what I want to do is to try to use several different voicings, but still kind of make it sound like, they all belong. And so we can really choose whatever we want here. I do think our last two chords, I still want to keep them the same. That's just a really nice closed resolution feeling, I think. So let's actually work backwards from that. So we have a closed triad with a single note in the left hand at the end, and then same thing, closed triad with one note in the left hand. Before that, the chord before that is F over A. Let's use a combined voicing for this. I think this will work well, and I think we'll be able to pick up one of the notes with our right hand as well, like we talked about in combined voicings. Just as a reminder, a combined voicing is just more often using an open position in the left hand and a closed position in the right hand. So if F major in first inversion is our chord, and an open position in the left hand is skipping every other note, then we skip C, go to F, and skip F and go to C. Now that's a pretty wide interval there, so we're more than happy to pick that C up with our right hand. And look at that, we were already playing this inversion of F with our right hand, so we have a very nice, easy voicing here to play this F over A. So have that second inversion in the right hand and this open position, first inversion in the left hand. So now let's keep working backwards. Let's go to that E minor. So we have a combined voicing here. Let's just switch it up and go back to a closed position voicing, but let's instead do an octave at the left hand, just kind of create some more resonance here. So this was what the inversion we were using in the right hand. Let's keep that blocked. But now let's use an octave in the left hand. So here that sounds going into the F chord. Oh, I really like that because now these octaves in the left hand kind of voice lead inward. So now even the bass, the left hand is voice leading as well. Actually, believe it or not, we've worked our way back and now we have different voicings for each chord. So we're starting out with, I kind of just went to it, but originally we were using a blocked plus single note in the left hand. And since the right hand is playing E, we can also make this a combined voicing as well. This would be the left hand open voicing. If we pick up the E with the right hand and then do the blocked chord the rest of the way in the right hand, we can also play this as a combined voicing as well. So we now have a filled in bass, we have some voice leading, and we have different voicings as well that we can use in our chord progression. So here's what it sounds like. Yeah, that already just has so much more direction and kind of depth behind it. Just as a reminder, here's what we started with. And here's where we are now. I think that's pretty nice. So now in step 5, this is kind of an optional step, I suppose, but I think it's still a good thing to keep in mind, and this has some techniques here that I think are good to keep in mind and think about, and that is trying to vary the harmonic rhythm a little bit. And what I mean by harmonic rhythm is that every time the chord changes, it's every 4 beats, right? It changes every bar, and the way we've just played it, it honestly sounds fine, right? It still sounds kind of fresh and alive, but if we wanted to kind of liven this up a little bit more, we can change the harmonic rhythm a little bit and make chord changes happen, after 3 beats or after 1 beat or after 2 beats, and just shift it up a little bit and just kind of make it so that, again, it just feels fresh and has some depth to it. So what we can do, what I'm thinking we'll do is on the second bar, let's make 2 chord changes in the second bar instead of just that one. We land on this E minor over G, then we need to go to F over A, what if we put what I would call an interjection chord in here? And all an interjection chord, and what I mean by that is just, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a chord that is just inserted in between 2 other ones. And it can be whatever we want. It can be some random chord, but we still kind of want it to make sense. And so I think let's try to find a chord that is still very close to this E minor over G. And if we think about it, I think a G chord is pretty close since only one note moves. Maybe we move the bass as well. Maybe put the bass, make everything in first inversion. So that G chord is now in first inversion. I kind of like that. I'm gonna keep the octaves. We do kind of lose our voice leading in the left hand a little bit, but I think that adds some interest, right? I think it's okay. So we have this. I kind of like leaving this just the same as it is. So let's put one other interjection chord, and let's do it in the first bar. And I think what will sound nice if it's on the fourth beat. So now we've had a chord change after 4 beats, after 2 beats, and now let's do one that's after 3 beats, and then it'll be in the first bar. Da, da. Let's do the same thing that we did for the second bar. Let's just find a chord that's pretty close to what we were on, which was C, just so that it still sounds smooth. What if this G were to move up to A? So that would give us an A minor chord in the right hand. That would still be pretty close. And that's still pretty close to the next E minor as well. So I think that would voice lead very nicely and still sound pretty smooth. Yeah, I like that. It just gives it a little bit of da, 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 a little bit of forward momentum, which is, kind of what we're aiming for. We don't want our music to feel too static, and we don't want our music to feel, it's like too stuck in a rut. And this is what really helps with that, right? And again, you can do this everywhere, and it's a great thing. If you feel like your music's just kind of stuck, try this out. Try using some interjection chords that happen in between other chords, and often chords that, still voice lead very nicely. So after step 5, here is where we've landed with our progression. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty nice. In the next one, we're going to just talk a little bit about how we can incorporate modes in some of our other things that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and just how we can use that to really spice up some of our melodies. So stay tuned for that. If you're a composer or a music producer who uses the piano to shape your musical ideas, whether you're writing for orchestra, producing hip-hop, rock, EDM, or anything in between, the Piano Composer is for you. This step-by-step course shows you how to go beyond simple blocked chords and turn your ideas into expressive, fully developed piano pieces with variation, climaxes, beautiful transitions, build-ups, and so much more. For further information, be sure to check out the link down in the description. And if you found this helpful, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.